Species Act is really fascinating, and we're going to talk about what's going on with it today. Mark Antony famously said, "Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears." And with apologies to the bard, I will paraphrase. I come neither to praise Caesar nor to bury him, but I'm here to speak what I know. And I'm going to give you the ESA fundamentals, and we're going to talk about how the Trump administration has changed the implementing regulations for the law, and talk about, to stimulate discussion, the media reporting of these changes, and opinions and commentaries from a variety of folks, and then we'll have, I'm sure, a lively discussion. Questions will arise, no doubt. And to keep things moving along, let's hold them until the discussion, if you don't mind. In 1973, Nixon signed the Endangered Species Act into law, and he said, "Nothing is more priceless and more worthy of preservation than the rich array of animal life with which our country has been blessed." The law that he signed is called a statute. It's the Endangered Species Act of 1973. But there are other types of law that are involved here too. There's administrative law. The ESA statute created two agencies, or gave two agencies that already existed the authority to create rules to interpret, administer, and enforce the prerogatives of Congress as expressed in the ESA statute. There's also case law, court decisions, if you will, that are important. We're not going to talk about those today. Mostly the administrative law today. But first you have to understand the statute. The two implementing agencies are, I'm going to call them FWS, and that's the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in the Department of the Interior, and also the National Marine Fisheries Service. I may call them NIMFs, because I'm kind of used to that. And they are in NOAA, National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, which is part of the Department of Commerce. So, and they are informally called NOAA Fisheries. They like that name better than NIMFs. The Endangered Species Act is the pit bull of environmental laws. It's short, compact, and has a hell of a set of teeth. So, let's take a look at those teeth, open wide. The purpose and goal of the ESA, then the processes, and the issues that those processes raise up. The ESA defines many terms that, like conservation, has a very specific meaning in the Act. So I'm going to underline those terms. Species is another one. Then I'm going to use dotted underlining just for emphasis, and also some highlighting for emphasis. The purpose of the ESA is to provide a means whereby ecosystems upon which endangered and threatened species depend may be conserved, and to provide a program for such. The overall goal of the Act is species conservation. Conservation means methods and procedures necessary to bring any endangered or threatened species to the point at which these measures are no longer necessary. And we should note that that point is reached when the species recovery goal has been attained. Species includes any subspecies of fish or wildlife or plants, and any distinct population segment of vertebrate fish or wildlife. This is important for sockeye salmon. And these little guys in the background, they say, "Wow, that's what we'll look like someday," should they live that long. The range of the sockeye salmon is very wide, and Idaho is at the very southeasternmost fringe of the range of sockeye salmon. The Columbia River Basin map shows that when the sockeye swim up the Columbia River, some of them turn left and keep on going up the Columbia River. Some of them turn right at the confluence with the Snake River and eventually come into Idaho and go up to Redfish Lake. This year, more than 50,000 turned left at the confluence, and 81 made it to Lower Granite Dam. And only about 15 of those made it up to Redfish Lake. So the ESA processes, the machinery of the ESA, remember this: identify, protect, and recover. And if you got that, if you can remember that, you understand how the Act works. It's pretty simple by design, but difficult in implementation. And we'll cover each one of those. Identify. First, determine species status. Is it threatened or endangered or not? Second, designate critical habitat that species needs. And we'll take those one by one. Species status. An endangered species is in danger of extinction. A threatened species is likely to become an endangered species within the foreseeable future. And that was tweaked a bit with these new regulations. So we'll talk about that later. Species status is determined using 5 factors, 5-factor analysis. Habitat destruction or modification is involved in more than 80% of the list of species. Overutilization, second, disease or predation, and fourth, adequacy of the existing regulatory mechanisms, and then fifth, catch-all, any other factors. The Secretary, that means the Secretary of Interior or Commerce, whether it's FWS or NIMS, makes listing determinations solely on the basis of the best scientific and commercial data available. That's in the statute. And then publish a list of these species specifying over what portion of the range they are endangered or threatened. On the list today are 944 plants and 718 animal species. The plants are mostly all flowering plants. The animals are broken down as follows. Most fishes more than others, then snails and clams, then mammals, birds, insects, reptiles and amphibians and others. In Idaho we have, anybody want to guess how many listed species? 20. We have 5 salmonid fishes. 4 of them go to the ocean, and 1, the bull trout, does not. We have 4 Snake River snails, little guys. And the white sturgeon, Kootenai River distinct population segment. Segment of the Kootenai River between 2 dams where the sturgeon can't go one way or the other. This is the same species as in Hell's Canyon that people fish for. But this is a distinct population segment separate from them. There are 4 mammals on the list in Idaho and 1 bird. There are 5 plants. We can talk about these later if you like. Now repeat on species status. The 2 lists specify over what portion of the range, and also specify any critical habitat within that range. So what the heck is critical habitat? Let's look at that. It's the specific areas occupied by the species that are essential to conservation of the species. Conservation means recovery. So it's habitat that they need to recover. This critical habitat is designated on the basis of the best scientific data available and after taking into consideration economic impact of specifying this critical habitat. Okay, we've got to identify. Now protect species and habitat. Section 7 of the Endangered Species Act covers any action by a federal agency, including land management agencies or agencies that distribute funds or other things. Those actions cannot jeopardize a species. And then applying everywhere is no take of a species, and that's Section 9 of the ESA. So we'll cover those one at a time. This protection raises fascinating economic, political, and institutional issues that will not soon fade. Indeed, these issues become more difficult as time goes on. No jeopardy. Each federal agency shall consult with Fish and Wildlife Service or NIMS to ensure that any action that agency takes is not likely to jeopardize the continued existence of a listed species or result in the adverse modification of their critical habitat. Jeopardize means an action that would reduce the likelihood of survival and recovery of that listed species. All right, move on to take. No take. Take applies everywhere to endangered species of vertebrate fish or wildlife, not plants. There's also sections in there that cover no commercial trade, no import and export of these species or parts of the species. Take is defined in the Act to mean harass, harm, pursue, hunt, shoot, wound, kill, capture, or collect. In the regulations for implementing the Act, the Fish and Wildlife Service wrote that harm is any act which injures fish or wildlife and may include significant habitat modification, whether it's critical habitat or not. Recover. The actions necessary to recover the species, called conservation actions, are identified in a recovery plan. And those plans shall include site-specific management actions needed to conserve the species. It includes criteria for delisting. They have to be quantified. How many of these species do you need before we can take it off the list? And what are your estimates of time and cost to do these actions? And we'll talk about cost later. In developing and implementing these plans, the agency shall give priority to those species that are most likely to benefit, particularly those species in conflict with economic activity. Prior to final approval of a plan, there shall be public notice and an opportunity for public review and comment on those plans. And the Secretary shall consider all information presented during those periods before approval. Okay, that's how the Act works. That's the guts of the Act, the mechanisms. Now, the issues that it raises. From here on, I'm going to dispense with the underlining of ESA-defined terms. So, in the declaration in the Act, Congress found that various species have been rendered extinct as a consequence of economic growth and development that's untempered by adequate concern and conservation. Untempered is the key word there. So the issue becomes the extent to which economic concern should be tempered to avoid extinction risk. And this is an enduring, overarching issue that manifests itself in several ways. Conservation funding for the federal agencies, both the regulatory agencies, FWS and NIMS, as well as land management and other management agencies. Another manifestation is the economic development implications of changed land use patterns associated with efforts to protect habitat. The National Research Council impaneled scientists in 1995, and they wrote a book on science and the Endangered Species Act, in which they said risk is central to ESA implementation. The ESA itself refers 6 times to significant risk to the well-being of species. The 2 main risks are risk of extinction, and secondly, the risks associated with unnecessary expenditures and curtailment of land use, given that there is substantial uncertainty about the accuracy of estimated extinction risk and about future events. So, to repeat, we've got the tempered word. And to me, that implies balance between adequate concern and conservation with economic growth and development. That's pretty clear from that language. And the manifestations there would be, on the one hand, underfunding of the agencies and therefore an underprotection, and overprotection leading to underdevelopment. So somehow those things have to be balanced, and it ain't easy. It's a complicated puzzle.